We always make the mistake in the West, which is never made in the East, of thinking that some things are just good and some things are just bad. There is nothing that is always good and nothing that is always bad. And there is nothing of which it cannot be said that if you take it far enough, it will become bad in itself.
I often recount an interview I watched with Philip Seymour Hoffman on happiness. And he says, the thing is, everything that I've ever done that makes me happy, I've had too much of, and it's made me miserable. Drugs being the main point, and ultimately that was his downfall. But he also tells a story of his children. He said there was a moment where I was on a boat with my two kids, and they were playing, and I sensed in that moment, this is happiness. But then they got older, and they started to recognise all my flaws. And even they became a source of my misery.
I mean, a very simple point that I've made a number of times is that, in fact, to be fulfilled, you need a degree of resistance. That's, I think, a very important deep point about everything, not just about human life, because actually it applies in a physical sense to everything that exists, that it can only exist and act through the existence of a degree of resistance.
It's instantly reminding me of the myth of Sisyphus, where he's asked to, well, I say asked.
Task.
He's tasked. I can't remember how the story goes, what he's done to offend the gods, but the response is that he has to push a boulder uphill.
Yeah.
And once it gets to the top, it then rolls back down again, over and over and over and over again. And Albert Camus uses that example to ask the question, which he believes is the fundamental philosophical question: should we or should we not take our own life? When you have the boulder to push uphill,
yes,
at least you know what it is that you're doing. And when the boulder disappears, that's when you become lost.
I like that, and I think that's true. And I think one way of illuminating that would be to point out that during wars, suicide rates plummet.
That is interesting.
And that the peak point for suicide is not in the winter. It's in around late April, early May, when the world is actually at its most benign.
Because
I think in that latter case, it may be something to do with the contrast between how you feel inside and how you sense the spirit of the world around you is moving. I don't know. I'm speculating. But I think in the case of war, it's very clear that what happens is that people have a clear sense of purpose in what they're doing and surviving. People don't kill themselves on Everest expeditions by committing suicide. They kill themselves by falling off a precipice.